Warm greetings from TNV Academy. Today in this session, we will be discussing about the clause 4.2 of Management System Standards. For example, understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties. So let's begin our discussion. New ISOs or those that have been recently updated have a new structure known as the NXSL high-level structure. This brings uniformity to ISOs, making them more straightforward to implement that align with other standards. Under this new structure, clause 4.2 now requires you to understand the needs and expectations of your interested parties. Knowing this can help you to develop and deliver products and services which consistently meet expectations, as well as look for ways in which your organization can improve. To begin, it is helpful to first identify who your interested parties are. An interested party is quite simply a stakeholder who buys your products or services, such as one of your customers or someone who impacts your organization's ability to provide its products or services. If you look carefully at the different ISO management system standards, they give a fairly broad definition to what they mean by an interested party. They talk about an individual or an organization who is or perceives themselves to be affected by your quality, safety, food safety or environmental management system. It is a very broad definition but does have a provision that limits those boundaries a little bit, that says they have made their interest in your management system known as your organization. To ensure you capture all of your interested parties, carefully list everyone who could have an impact or whose requirements you must meet. Comb through your legal documents, corporate requirements and all contracts and agreements that your company have decided to comply with. Now guide your research in order to determine the relevance of an interested party and their requirements. Your organization needs to answer, does this interested party or their requirements affect your organization's ability to achieve the intended outcomes of its management system? If the answer is yes, then the interested party's requirement should be captured and considered when planning your management system. There are many ways to capture this information. Your approach could include: the first one is information summarized and as output to the quality, risk and opportunity registers. The second one is information summarized as an input to the identification of environmental aspects and impacts registers. The third one is information summarized as an input to the identification of health, safety, hazard and risk registers. The fourth one is record in a simple spreadsheets with version control. The fifth one is logged and maintained in a database to allow tracking and reporting. The sixth one is captured, recorded and disseminated through key meetings. Try using brainstorming techniques to identify relevant external and internal interested parties. For example, customers, partners and users, external providers, owners, shareholders, employees, trade unions, government agencies, regulatory authorities and local community. Once the stakeholders and their requirements are identified, the next step is to consider which stakeholder requirements generate compliance obligations. Legal requirements should be identified, therefore other requirements. This process of adopting requirements will allow you to focus and coordinate on what's important. Make reference to all objective evidence, including examples of interested parties and any resulting compliance obligations. Look for evidence that your organization has undergone a process to initially identify these groups and then to identify any of their requirements that are relevant to your management system. You should also determine whether these groups' requirements are reviewed and updated as changes in their requirements occur, or when changes to your organization's management system are planned. Ensure that your organization has properly identified its interested parties and subsequently determined if any of their needs and expectations to be adopted as a compliance obligation. Ensure that this process is revisited periodically because the relevant requirements of relevant interested parties may change over time. Although not specifically required, objective evidence could be a list of matrix of the interested parties, their corresponding needs and expectations, and indication of which of these accepted as compliance obligations. Compliance obligations might include, the first one is all relevant legal requirements. The second one is all requirements imposed by upper levels in the organization, for example, corporate requirements. The third one is all relevant requirements of relevant interested parties that the organization decides to comply with, whether contractually customers or voluntarily, environmental or safety commitments. You should ensure that the monitoring and measurement processes are included in the internal audit program so your organization can assure itself that the checking processes are validated and that the data it is communicated is accurate. It is important to remember that Clause 4.2, understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties, interacts with the following clauses. The first one is Clause 4.3. When determining the scope, the organization shall consider requirements of relevant interested parties referred to in 4.2. The second one is Clause 5.2.2. The quality, environmental or health and safety policies are available to relevant interested parties as corporate. The third one is Clause 6.1.1. When planning the management system, the organization shall consider the requirements referred to in 4.2 and determine risk and opportunity that needs to be addressed. The fourth one is Clause 8.3.2. In determining the stages and controls for design and development, the organization shall consider the level of control expected for the design and development process by customers and other relevant parties. The fifth one is Clause 9.3.2. Management reviews are planned and carried out considering information on management system performance and effectiveness, including trends in customer satisfaction and feedback from relevant interested parties. The sixth is internal stakeholders could include employees and contractors, client and customers, suppliers, unions and workers' representatives. The seventh one is external stakeholders could include regulators, shareholders, neighbors and communities, local authorities and government. The relevant requirements of interested parties must be available as input into the management system planning process as potential risk and opportunities. Clause 6.1. There is no requirement to retain documented information, but the following types of documentation would help to evidence this. The first one is minutes of meetings from each group of interested party. The second one is requirement spreadsheets and databases, CRM and ERM type applications. The third one is external communications and documentation. The fourth one is quality manual. The fifth one is flow down and capture of requirements relevant to the management system defined in contractors, orders, statements of works, terms of business, etc. The sixth one is records of meetings where interested parties and their requirements are routinely discussed and monitored. The seventh one is stakeholders mapping to determine importance. The eighth one is records of surveys, networking, face-to-face meetings, association, membership, attending conferences, lobbying, participation in benchmarking. Look for evidence that your organization has undergone a process to initially identify these groups and then to identify any of their requirements that are relevant to your organization's management system. You should also determine whether these groups' requirements are reviewed and updated as changes in their requirements occur or when changes to your organization's management system are planned. So we have now come to the conclusion of this session. I hope that Clause 4.2 requirements are understood by you. In case you have any doubts or questions on what we have discussed today, then please put them in the comment section of the video and we will be really happy answering them. Till we meet next, it's best wishes from TNV Academy.